Right, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to you all, and especially warm welcome to Ella Young. Ella read Natural Sciences at Newham College, Cambridge. With her brother Chris James and her husband Bev Young, she co-wrote an educational book entitled Help Your Child with Science. Ella has maintained her interest in science, and since moving to Devon in the 1990s, she's been an active environmental campaigner. Well-read, well-travelled, and always seeking to find out more about the places she visits, she likes to get to know the people, as you will see in her presentation this morning, A Walking Holiday in the Sahara. Ella has been generous with her presentations for our U3A, and they're always most interesting. So sit back and enjoy, and thank you, Ella.
Thank you, Christine. Before I share my screen, I'm very curious. Can you wave your hand if you've been to Tunisia or anywhere else in North Africa? Great, good. And I suspect nobody will be waving now, but did anybody see the amazing hotels on the hotel in Abu Dhabi? Did anybody see that?
No.
No, I watched that because I wanted to see the camels. And just thinking about Tunisia, something that I eat quite regularly are these dates. And you'll see in the picture, if you can, there we are, that they're not riding the camels. And so you'll be rather shocked by the first picture, because this talk was advertised as a walking holiday in the Sahara. And now you see a woman sitting on the camel. And I have to say, we were only allowed one ride each on the camel, unless you'd either trod on a scorpion or been ill. And this poor woman trod on a scorpion. And that's why she's riding the camel, because really you can see the camels are absolutely loaded with food, with water, and with our luggage. So we are not riding the camels except once. So Tunisia is a really, really tiny little country up here, sandwiched between, particularly between Algeria and Libya. And in classical times, it was really important, really being in the center for the Mediterranean trade. And Tunis is very near the ancient city of Carthage. And I was amazed to see in Tunisia Roman aqueducts still carrying water, and thinking how many buildings today are going to be still used in 2,000 years' time. And of course, they have lovely Roman mosaics. Anyway, I'm going to come back to that map a bit later, and you'll see why. So we landed at the airport at Tunis, and then we were taken fairly quickly all the way down to Douz, or Do here, which was where we actually started from. And this is the tourist map. And look at that lovely, lovely lake there between Tunis and Do. And here it is. There's a person, so you can get some idea of the scale. Shortage of fresh water is now a very big issue, but it is actually one of Tunisia's exports, which is salt. So this is a salty lake, and when it dries up, they can export the salt. So this is chapter 1. I'm sure you know about Ramadan. It's the Muslim month of fasting, where you're not meant to eat or drink or smoke in daylight hours. And this was particularly difficult for I call them 6 Bedouin. They weren't all strictly Bedouin. You can imagine keeping going all day in the heat without a drink was pretty tough. And you can see it was 18 years ago, in the days of my youth. Well, here is the Bedouin tent, which we didn't erect every night because it never rained, but it was waiting for us when we got out of our Jeep. and we had lunch there. And gosh, it was a change in climate from Britain in October. And here we are, feeling very hot, having changed out of our jeans into something nice and loose, and really getting used to the long daily siesta that you need in that climate. And you can see all our party here. The person who organised it on the right is Alan Heeks, who I think is quite well known as an author and environmentalist. And he wanted to make the holiday a bit of a Sufi spiritual experience with some meditations and some chanting. I don't think everybody signed up to the holiday for a Sufi experience. I didn't, but it was very interesting. So this must be the biggest, strongest camel, having that enormous tent loaded on. And you can see people have got different headgear. Some people just ordinary sun hats, which I think was what I had. There's no pictures of me because I was the photographer, and lots of people, went for the Arab headdress, which I think I found rather hot. And you can see the little wooden, I don't know what you call it, a sort of saddle that everything was loaded on. And as I said, we weren't riding the camels except once. They were the pack animals. And a friend I showed this presentation to yesterday was telling me about all the camels in Australia that were imported for building the railway, and how they went wild and now are re-imported into the Middle East. So we were asked to bring the lightest and smallest luggage that we could. And I was very proud because mine was the smallest. And this was what we were supposed to bring: a sleeping bag, a kind of camping mat, and a bivy bag, which is not quite a tent. I had never used a bivy bag before. You'll see later what they're for and what they look like. And we were also told that in the whole holiday, there'd only be one chance to wash. And so we had to bring lots of wet wipes and be prepared for not washing. Not very easy for some of us. Now, because I had the smallest amount of luggage, I also had the smallest camel, which was a very young male being trained in being a kind of tourist donkey. And at the beginning, we had a pep talk, and we were asked that every time we stopped for the night to please go and take our luggage off the camels. Well, my camel had no wish for this white woman to come anywhere near. And the first night when I went to go and claim my luggage, he made it perfectly clear by hissing and just looking belligerent that I wasn't to come near. So I didn't attempt to help after that. The female camels are only kept for breeding, so all our train of camels were males. So off we go. It's interesting, in the amazing hotels, those camels were all muzzled, and our camels weren't muzzled. But you see they are attached to each other. So if they fancied a bit of greenery nearby, unless they were very quick, they couldn't get it. So off we go. This was the first night. Quite a bushy place, and you could choose your own place to set up your bivy bag. And of course, there were no toilet facilities, so you just wandered off somewhere. And a most amazing thing about relieving oneself was the flies, because they were so thirsty. They rushed in to drink whatever you produce before it could sink into the sand. And you'll see the camels are wandering off to have a good feed, or most of them anyway. So this was my little setup every night. You can see the bivy bag is like a kind of tent. It's not going to rain. And the black bit here in the foreground is a mesh. So it's both a window, but it also keeps the flies off you. And if there's a sandstorm, it keeps the sand from blocking your nostrils and suffocating you. So I was very, very glad to have a bivy bag. So here is the full moon rising. I'm ashamed to say, I guess I was 62 18 years ago. I had never realized that the full moon rises in the east when the sun sets in the west. We're so surrounded by buildings and trees. I hadn't had that awareness until we were in the desert and there weren't any other lights and there wasn't anything blocking the horizon. Really, really beautiful and quiet. And every evening, they built a fire and we sat round on the blankets and they sang and drummed and entertained us. And I felt ashamed because they asked us if we would like to sing for them. And we were a completely, what shall I say, disjointed group of people. We didn't know each other, apart from this is my friend, Margaret Tidwell, who's a yoga teacher. And I don't think there was anything that we all knew, not Waltzing Matilda or the Yellow Submarine. So we were a pretty poor entertainment in return for all their jolly songs and drumming. So this is now the morning, and you can see, even though it's in the desert, we're actually not short of firewood, and they've got several fires going to boil water for the tea and coffee and to make the bread. And I wondered if the Bedouin had really managed to eat before before sunrise, if they had some food from yesterday. And I also wondered whether they slept in the blankets that we were sitting on round the table. So breakfast is being prepared, and here's the unleavened bread being kneaded on a blanket. And now it's been cooked in the hot ashes from the fire. Really amazing to have your breakfast bread cooked in front of your eyes, just using firewood from the desert. It was amazing. And the next amazing thing was they would always call when a meal was ready, "à table." I forgot to say that two of the Bedouins spoke very good French, and we were able to talk to them and learn a lot from them. And there wasn't a table, so à table, and you came and sat on the blankets. You can see one of the camels is already nearby. The rest are still having their breakfast too somewhere. So this man acted as the waiter. I can't remember his name, and there's a pot of tea and a pot of coffee. And you can see some of us are bareheaded and some have got their Arab headgear on already. And I think there are some dates. And here are the flies come to share our breakfast. There's the bread that you saw being cooked. Packet processed cheese, not my favorites, the dates, and then some jam, which the flies were also enjoying. And we're loaded up and off we go. And this is the same woman that you saw in the original photograph, who unfortunately stepped on a scorpion. Nobody else did after that, I'm glad to say. And one of my friends had diarrhea, and she was offered a camel, and she said, no, if I need to go, I need to be nearer the sand than on the back of a camel. So she managed to walk. So we only had our 1 turns on the camel. So now we stop for a couple of hours at lunchtime. If you're lucky, there might be a tree like this to provide some shade, or if not, you can use one of the blankets to make yourself a little shelter. And you can see here one of the camels is being hobbled. It was very interesting. At night time, some of the camels were just allowed free, and some of them were hobbled, which meant that they could only walk with very short steps, and so they couldn't go far. So I guess the Bedouin knew exactly which ones were liable to stray and hard to catch in the morning to load up. And they just sat in the shelter of the camels. And it was interesting, the camels didn't all choose to sit down. I suspect that's couscous or rice. It looks quite heavy. I think there's one there sitting down, but they're just standing and resting during the siesta time. And again, another evening passed. So this is now chapter 2, water. Well, there's not much of it. This is a scene at breakfast another day. You can see somebody drinking in the foreground, and in the background are the 2 people who've been to the well to get water in these inner tubes of, I suppose, tractors or lorries. So water is really precious. So every day they went and they refilled all these tubes, and then we were able to have our share. Now, if you've been camping in the old days, you might have used a wet J-cloth to drape over your milk. And this is what they did. From those inner car tires, they poured the water into these little jerry cans, which were covered with some kind of cloth, which they damped to make it cool. And then this is my friend Margaret. I think she's allowed 2 large and 1 small bottle during the day as we walk. And the fasting Muslims didn't have anything to drink. And you can see, like me, Margaret is wearing an open sandal. You would have thought it might be pleasant to walk on the sand, but actually there are lots of sharp things, not only thorns from some of the vegetation, but the desert rose, which is a gypsum. So it wasn't often very comfortable to walk barefoot. Now this is, I find, really quite sad, because this is a mosque at the village where some of the Bedouin used to live. And the reason they had to leave their village was because the well dried up. Now, if we go back to this map, there's a big aquifer underground here. I think it's called the North Saharan Aquifer. And this supplies part of Algeria, Tunisia, and part of Libya. And Libya particularly, I don't know about Algeria, is doing such a lot of irrigation that basically the water table is going down and down and down. And you may have seen on television, I think it was about a month ago, a program where they're using satellites to monitor the big aquifers all over the world, and they're nearly all empty. So we're using water faster than it can be replaced. And that makes me worry about the, the date harvest and everything else. If the wells dry up, the dates won't fatten, the olives won't fatten. There's going to be a real problem. So going back to the deserted village, this is the beautiful roof of one of the huts we went inside, which they had made themselves from palm fronds. So at last, the well. I found this quite difficult because first of all, you had to, it took a long time lowering the bucket and bringing the water up and tipping it into the trough here. And our Bedouin were very, very fussy about what time we went there, because this well is used by a lot of herdsmen, I guess, with camels and sheep and goats. And if we were going to undress and wash our hair, they wanted to make sure that there weren't any men around. And in fact, I was kind of on guard to make sure that nobody came near. And it was also quite difficult to wash because we were told we mustn't put any soap or shampoo in this drinking trough, because that was where the animals drank. So I didn't enjoy this experience, and you can imagine how much we all enjoyed taps and showers when we got back afterwards. But it wasn't quite so bad not being able to wash, because it was a dry heat. So one didn't feel very sweaty. And anyway, if you were sweaty, the flies came and drank it up anyway. So chapter 3. To me, there's no features here. There's no mountains, no clumps of trees, no Woodbury Fort. But they were very good at knowing exactly where they were. And our leader Bedouin had another tourist group, and he would go off, not on a camel, on foot, and visit his other group and then come back and see us. So they knew where we were, even though it looked pretty featureless to me. And there was much more vegetation than I expected. One of the Bedouin told me that there's about 150 different plants in the Sahara, and the camels can self-medicate. So if they're not feeling well, if there's something wrong, they know which plants to eat to get well. The only thing the minders the Bedouin have to take care of is skin complaints. If they have a skin complaint, they have to do something about that. Well, we never discovered what made these burrows. I mean, some kind of rabbit, I would think, or burrowing mammal. Now, if you have a look at the sand, it's not like the coarse sand on Exmouth Beach. It's as fine as talcum powder. So rubbish to cover the Sahara Desert with solar panels, because unless you had thousands of people dusting them every day, they wouldn't be good for long. I didn't really say much about the night sky, but of course, with no light pollution, the stars and planets and satellites and everything were wonderfully visible in our long nights. And you can see some of the little footprints. I have no idea what they are, if that was a tick or a centipede. And there's some more really quite tiny little footprints. You see, there's some there, even some teeny weeny. I mean, that must be a beetle or something there. And I'd been very careful, and I'd wrapped my watch up in layers of sellotape, and I had lots of plastic bags on my camera. But many of our group lost the use of watches and cameras, being clogged up with this fine sand. Again, I have no idea what that is. I think it's something with a lot of legs, whether a tick or whether a centipede. And that's a little bit of the desert roads, the gypsum, that made it so uncomfortable. And you can see all kinds of bits here, made it uncomfortable trying to walk barefoot. And here we've actually stopped where there's a big collection of the desert roses, the gypsum. I did bring a piece back, but it disintegrated, and it wasn't really easy to carry stuff. Either had to carry it yourself or add it to your load with the camels. Right, and now we come to the camels. I just don't find them attractive in the way I find horses attractive. You may have seen in the news a few weeks ago, there was some competition in the Middle East on beautiful camels, and 6 had been disqualified because they'd had Botox injections in their faces. Well, I don't know what bit of a camel's face is improved with Botox, but they don't seem to be beautiful to me. But of course, they're very, very well adapted to life in the desert. They can close their nostrils when there's a sandstorm, and they have these great long eyelashes, and of course, wonderful feet. And they've also got quite loud voices, and they might object that the load is heavier than it was yesterday. And off we go. There's the big tent and the supports again. So I mentioned hobbling before. I suppose about half the camels were hobbled. This is definitely an evening time because some luggage has been unloaded. Now, here is our ride on the camel. That's my friend Margaret. And you can see here the camels aren't muzzled, and so they're enjoying a snack. I'm sure if you're a horse rider or you've been horse riding, you know what a temptation is to horses. And there's one showing the hard patches they get from the peculiar way they stand up and sit down. And this one also has diarrhea, and its tail has been tied up, as has this one. You can imagine if they have diarrhea and they swish their tails, you can imagine what happens to your blankets and your luggage and the water on top. And there's their amazing, amazing feet, which are so spread out, they don't sink in quicksand, and the lovely footprints they leave. Well, it's the end of the holiday. We have another evening of drumming and singing with our wonderful crew. And I don't know how this photo was taken. I think it might be photos superimposed. And the thing is, why does one go on a holiday like this? It was the most dreadful food of any holiday I've ever been on. But I think it's the feeling we must do these things before we get too old and live adventurously.
That was really incredible. Your photographs are stunning. The clarity of them was breathtaking.
Well, I suppose it's the clear air, isn't it?
Well, I was going to ask about that because you mentioned the night sky, and we talk a lot in this country about, as you say, light pollution. There are certain, I think Exmoor is the nearest sort of relatively light pollution-free area for viewing the stars, but it really must have been quite remarkable to see up in the sky just how twinkling those lights were. Did you I noticed you had your star guide with you. Did you spend a bit of time?
Oh yes. I can't remember, what time it got dark and got light, but there was nothing to do after dark when their singing and drumming ended. And of course, in your bivvy bag, it wasn't so good because you had the net. It was interesting, when we first arrived, they suggested we buy ourselves the thick blankets to wrap around at night, but in fact it was exceptionally mild, and I didn't buy one, and we didn't need them. We weren't cold. I mean, the problem was more being hot in the day, not cold at night.
And I was fascinated talking of comforts. You obviously made the most of the situation within the environment, but you said you longed for the shower and the tap. How did your holiday actually end? You finished your expedition in the desert, and then go to a normal hotel, or?
Yes, no, we had a couple of nights in Sousse, which is a tourist resort on the East Coast, where, you know, we were encouraged to buy souvenirs, and we had most beautiful bathroom and architecture and so on. But I didn't include that because lots of people have been to Sousse and have enjoyed the artifacts.
But your first bath or shower after that experience is highly memorable, was it?
It was, yes. But as I said, it wasn't a great hardship, you know, because dry heat is not as what should I say, as exhausting and smelly as wet heat, as humid heat.
Humidity is just really draining, isn't it? Yes. So that was good. Another thing I was just fascinated about was how the camels were tethered or hobbled, as you say. Did you find that those that weren't, I mean, they were allowed to stray away, but did any of
well, one or two of them, you can't see in the photos, they came and they stood right behind us in the singing and dancing. So you looked around at night and there was a camel right there. So some of them were really sociable and did enjoy the evening's entertainment. I know, I mean, every camel is completely different, and they knew one from another.
Because if one does stray, it must be an absolute nightmare to try and track it down and bring it back to the herd. Is it to the group?
Yes. Well, they were careful that didn't happen. No, it was very interesting in the amazing hotels when they have this fearfully expensive desert experience in Abu Dhabi. They had a way of cooking meat, sort of sinking a cylinder into the sand. I'm trying to remember whether it was with hot stones, you know, leaving it for hours. But ours was advertised as a vegetarian holiday, and I think the Bedouin, you know, couldn't understand why we weren't eating meat. I think they, I mean, maybe they were eating their meat at night on the sly. I don't know, but you know, you couldn't really catch. You know, we didn't have fresh vegetables. I can't remember what was with the couscous and the rice. I guess spices, but it was a very boring diet. But one didn't feel terribly hungry because of the heat.
No, that's interesting. Well, thank you. So a couple of burning questions from me, but the floor's open to everyone. In fact, Anthony's got a question already. Anthony is saying, you missed the introduction, but how many nights was the walk and how far did you walk?
How many nights? It was a week. And how far did we walk? I have no idea. We could still very, very, very in the distance see the lights from Dhu, even at our farthest point. So I'm afraid I have no idea. Perhaps I should also make a confession that one of the options on the holiday was 24 hours alone in the desert. And I opted out of that because I live on my own. And I thought, you know, I'm always living on my own. You know, why should I come on holiday? And then I felt a bit of a coward because people were just, you know, they could go off and find their own place. And you were given, you know, delightful and packaged cheese, dry bread and dates for 24 hours and plenty of water to see how you could survive on your own for that time. And there were some big arguments because some of the men wanted to go a long way away and they wouldn't allow it because they said, you know, if there's a sandstorm, we'll never be able to find you. We only had one sandstorm. And I mean, it didn't bury us, but, you know, it sort of half buried us, like, you know, coming out in the morning and, you know, the sand was up here. Wow. So I didn't take the most adventurous options on that holiday, I have to confess.
Well, very wise. It doesn't sound particularly appealing, that, does it? But there we go. It's there for anyone who wanted it.
Ella, that was 18 years ago. The world is getting ever more dangerous. Have you got any idea as to, one, whether that company is still running those sorts of holidays? Have you wondered about safety since then? of a lot of presumably English or European people out in, potentially a terrorist area, isn't it?
Yes, it wasn't run by a company. It was organised by that man Alan Heeks. But I'm sure there are desert holidays. I should check it up online. I know, one of Tunisia's main sources of foreign currency is tourism.
Yeah.
Because there's Carthage and all the Roman remains, and a lovely climate as well. As I said, dry heat, which is much more comfortable.
And talking of changing times, I was very interested about what you said about navigation, the fact that the Bedouin in a featureless landscape seem to know where things are. And I suppose this would have been pre-sat-nav navigation. I mean, was it just innate? Did they know the area so well that they could find their way around, or did they use any other method? Just don't know.
Absolutely no idea. I mean, I know some people. My late husband, was very good at it, and I have no sense of direction. I can read a map, I can, work it out from the sun or the stars, but I've got no innate sense of direction. So maybe it's a gift that some people have.
Yeah, interesting.
I know, bees and birds and all kinds of wildlife can do it, but we can't all do it. I can't.
You can imagine that evolution comes into play in that respect. So people who haven't got that facility died out long ago.
Survival of the fittest, that's right. It's to orientate oneself.
Ella, did you have a solar charger for your batteries?
No.
Oh, so did you take loads of batteries with you then for your camera?
I'm awfully sorry. I don't remember.
Right.
Certainly, I think there are all my photographs except the one at the beginning,
Yes.
the rather bold one,
Yes.
which is somebody else's. No, I mean, you had to be so careful about getting out your camera and opening your camera and not getting dust and everything. No, I absolutely don't. I don't remember at all.
But it's an interesting question because, again, technology has moved on, and it'd be fascinating to see what aids there are if you were to go on a similar expedition, if I can call it that, these days.
Actually, if you've heard of Shelterbox, the charity that at a drop of a hat, they will disappear off to different parts of the world to help people where disasters happen. And they've got a base in Truro, I think it is, or Totnes. And very interesting having a look around there, but they have these boxes where everything's ready for whatever conditions it might be. So there'll be a box there ready with stuff for deserts. Certainly they had solar powered things there, which made it much easier to have the use of power when you have only got the sun. But it'd be interesting to see what they've actually got for a desert expedition if they had to go and help people in such conditions.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Yes, so it's like a sort of instant survival kit. You've got everything in that environment. Yeah.
If you've never heard of Shelterbox, I thought actually it was to do with the homeless. It's not. It's to do with disasters around the world, where this centre, based in Cornwall, have these ready prepared kits to go out to whatever place they find it's needed.
I think it's recovered from quite a bad financial a scandal. Somebody had taken a lot of the funds away, and that gave it a bad name. But that was a few years ago, so I think it's recovered its reputation from.
I thought it was Oxfam where there was some problem.
No, it was Shelterbox too, sadly.
Okay.
Right, it was the chairman, I think.
Yeah,
It was a very senior person in it.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that hit the news for all the wrong reasons, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It did.
But I think they have a lot of their equipment already on parts of the world, don't they? Because they can't get it to certain parts quickly enough. So I think some of it is spread out already
Yeah.
in other areas.
I think that's the way the organisation is now going.
Yeah.
Rather than keep it here and wait.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
What they get in those boxes is unbelievable.
Well, there's going to be sadly many more refugees from Ukraine. It's so sad.
Yeah,
Who wants the war apart from Putin extending his empire? I mean,
yes, we're in for a tough time. Yes, you're absolutely right. I've just put the link to Shelter Box in the chat box, and I see that they are, as you say, a sort of an international organisation. But I think their current main appeal is for the Yemen. My computer's running a bit slowly, so I can't bring it up again now. But thank you for mentioning that, because that's really interesting to be aware of that approach.
Yeah, Shelter Box are at Helston, I think, because we were invited to go and have a tour around some years ago. And I think it was about the time of the scandal, but the setup was incredibly impressive. Technical backup, the stocks and packaging, and it's a brilliant operation.
Actually, if we're short of a speaker for a couple of years' time, then a speaker from Shelter Box, I'm sure, would be happy to come and talk.
They would be very pleased to come, because I belong to Ladies Probus and we had them many years ago. And I think it made more people aware of what happens. Yes, so I was going to suggest a speaker would be worthwhile having.
And also they'd bring a box suitable for whatever and show you what is actually in this box. So it would be a demonstration as well. And it would obviously get funds for Shelter Box, because plenty of people here would be happy to support that. So yes, I think it'd be better for them to come and talk to us than for individuals to go down to Truro or Totnes. I think it's Truro, actually.
Well, it was Helston, definitely. Yeah.
Well, this was only last year, so.
yeah, I go back a long time. But I think the cost of a Shelter Box now is about £500 or £600. I think that looks after a family of 4 people for, it's got freshwater generating thingamabobs, and it's really.
I know UNHCR were appealing for their tents for Afghanistan, and they said £80, which I find hard to believe, because those are insulated, with sort of duvet-like walls and ceiling for insulation. So there must be lots of different kinds for different climates and different charities.
Well, I suppose if they're buying a bulk lot of a certain type of tent, they get it reduced from the manufacturer rather than the amount we pay in Cotswold Outdoor or somewhere.
And they must be buying most of their supplies in different countries where they already have, but it is a very worthwhile cause. I know I contribute to them because I just think it's fantastic what they can do. Just imagine natural disasters and wars and that. We're so fortunate here.
We are. Thank you. Well, that's been very useful. Thank you for raising that, Anthony. Any other questions about Ella's adventure?
Yes, Ella, I see you all wore sandals, so I presumed that the sand wasn't burning hot and you didn't get sunburns.
I mean, we did siesta in the middle of the day, and we were all wearing either sun hats or cloths and so on. It wasn't burning hot, but then I'm just trying to think, because I did sometimes walk barefoot for a while, so it wasn't. I suppose because it's pale, it's where you have black sand that it's unbearably hot on some beaches. I mean, it is a long time ago. It's 18 years ago. But I thought I would like to go barefoot. And the reason I couldn't wasn't because the sand was too hot, was because there were horrible prickly things. And again, I mean, I'm sure we probably used sun cream and so on, but we did protect certainly our heads and faces quite well from the sun.
Wonderful experience.
You mentioned the Sufi experience, the meditative experience. So I'm just wondering, of course, if you are barefoot, that literally grounds you more, doesn't it?
Yes.
That would be the theory. But although you weren't personally interested in that side of it, Ella, were there other members of the party that did actually carry out various meditation?
Well, I mean, I joined in, in the chanting and in the meditation, but
Right.
that wasn't really the reason I had done the holiday. Sure. And I think the person who organised him, I don't think he's a Sufi either, but he wanted to bring some sort of spiritual dimension, because I mean, it was pretty amazing, being out there, with no, as I said, no taps, no light, just under the stars, and particularly, the way they made that bread, I thought was really fascinating. In a way, a bit like the Aborigines, not carrying a lot of stuff, but just finding what you need, and then when you finish with it, leave it behind. So I'm sure, if we didn't use all the firewood, they would leave it behind for the next people.
Yeah.
Not sort of storing stuff really, and said, I don't know how they slept, but I suspect they just wrapped the blankets around that we were sitting on at meal times and so on. Just a sort of, I suppose, a simpler way of life. But it was interesting. I don't normally tune into amazing hotels because they had quite a lot about Bedouins and bringing to tourists the Bedouin way of life. And they had, much more luxurious versions of that great big tent, and these amazing meat dishes cooked in the sand, and so on. So we didn't have the classic haute cuisine of North Africa by any means.
It sounds like you had a more authentic experience, Ella, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions, anyone? No.
Well, I'm sure people have had this experience of wanting to do something before we get too old. I think this was one of the incentives. And my friend was 72 at the time, was a yoga teacher, and she's now died. But she said, we've got to do these things, and we went on several adventurous cycling holidays together, including in Bohemia and in the Outer Hebrides. And I think she was partly, the driver about doing adventurous things. I don't think I'm very adventurous, really.
After you retired and started your adventure in North Africa, which other trips have you got under your sleeve for future talks?
Well, I'm afraid the only one that you haven't had, I'm giving on the 24th of March. And that wasn't really a holiday. It was teaching children's science in a children's home in Andhra Pradesh in India. And I've had great trouble with the pictures and the quality. I was thinking what Maurice was saying, the quality of the pictures as well. So this time next month, that's the last one, I think.
What a super trailer for next time, Ella. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yes. Christine, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Ella. Well, stunning, clear photographs and so descriptive in their content, and so fortunate for us to see, as you'd been very careful with your camera. And you certainly transported us to a different way of living, shown so well, as with the unleavened bread and the fire roaring away, the loading of the camels, that was quite interesting, the gathering at the well with you on guard, and so kind of you, as I know you've missed Exeter U3A's monthly meeting this morning. So it's really kind of you to give us this presentation, as I know that you would have liked to have been there. So if we could give Ella a warm round of applause, if you unmute yourselves, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ella. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done, Ella, and a wonderful trailer for next month as well. Thank you.